welcome everyone to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. Doing great. Can't wait to talk about some of the places we've been and the things that we've seen.
Oh, I know. And you're calling in from a global location, I understand, today. You want to share that with the audience?
Absolutely. I'm in Cancun today and this week. So
very good.
Yep, getting a little bit of fresh air and sunshine.
I love it. I knew Mexico. I didn't realize it was Cancun. I forgot that part. But lucky you. Hopefully you get to be on the beach, getting tanned and relaxing at least a little bit. So good deal. I love Mexico. I've been many, many times with my family. It's always been a great experience.
That's right. Well, yes. Let's dive in. We got fun stuff today.
I know. We have a lot in store here. We've been doing some traveling. We've been at some events. We want to recap those. As always, we've got market news, and a lot of our market news is revolving around the topic of artificial intelligence. ChatGPT has everybody in a roar, in positive ways and negative ways. There's been a lot of funny things coming out of there, so wanted to talk about that. And then, of course, we want to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning within the HR space. There's so much opportunity here. I'm excited. I'm also understand there are people who have apprehensions. Again, is this a game changer or is this game over for HR? Is our title this week, and so we're going to dig into that at least at a high level and get some discussion going on that. So let's start off maybe with some events, Julie. Maybe I'll get us started. I did two here in Atlanta, which was really been a blessing to have events right in my backyard in the Big Peach. It was a really good time. So I was able to go down to see the guys at iSolved. If you're not familiar with iSolved is an HCM technology platform, incredibly mature solution, one of my favorites, an amazing C-suite and just a great team. So I was fortunate to sit in on one of their roadshow stops where they brought in a small segment of their customers across major cities and really just have a dialogue around the challenges that they're facing and the things that iSolve's doing to help them. And really just got to look at the product in terms of where they're headed from a roadmap standpoint. So really great day and really, really enjoyed being there. So thank you to Amberly Dressler and Lena Tonk, the CMO, for having me. I really appreciated that. And Julie, you were at Shared Services and Outsourcing, I understand.
I was. Just last week was the 27th annual Shared Services and Outsourcing Conference. It's one of the biggest and only conferences for folks that are standing up shared services, not only in HR, but also in other back office areas like finance and accounting and supply chain and so forth. And they do quite a show every spring in March. They had 1,000 attendees this year. I think that does include speakers, sponsors, so but still quite a large gathering. And a couple of highlights I thought I would mention from the SSOW event, the Shared Services and Outsourcing Week event. There's always a State of the Union type of presentations, and the SSOW just does tons of research and gathers data. And they presented that a universe of 10,497 delivery centers around the world that are on the radar. And it was curious to see that, there was actually somewhat equal distribution with 3,300 to 3,600 in the Americas, in Europe, and in Asia Pac. So folks on our, in our side of the pond here are quite familiar with shared services in the Americas. But if you're not really truly global and much larger, you may forget that, that there's just as much delivery center activity in the other regions as there is at home.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. Yeah. I'm lucky you. I've always wanted to check out that event. I've never been. I'm a big fan of the SSON and have spoken for them actually with Amitis was the last time I did one. Amitis, the global payroll provider. I will tell you, any of the firms that are listening, if you're a vendor listening, especially if you're in marketing, I think that the SSON is an area that a lot of vendors overlook. And I think that that's a fantastic organization that you can find a lot of, I don't want to call them captive, but sort of folks that are at a level in HR and finance, both obviously those two mixes, but folks that are fundamentally bought into the idea of shared services and outsourcing as a strategic path. So it's always kind of refreshing to be in that group, and I've always enjoyed it. And a lot of great content comes out of there. So really good stuff.
Let me just mention that the whole format for that, especially for those who aren't vendors but who are practitioners, is really focused on hearing from your peers. So
Yes.
the format doesn't necessarily find a way for vendors to share and be the presentation speakers. I worked with Heidelberg Materials, and we did a presentation on payroll transformation journey,
Yes. Cool.
and that was wonderful. So thanks, Yvette DeLeon, for agreeing to be a speaker at the session with a lot of peers. And I would say also, just so folks aren't surprised, it isn't an HR specific event. So
Yes.
as you might imagine, there's a universe of finance folks that maybe doubles the size of ours. And so if you go, you should know. There is one in the fall in Las Vegas in September. But if you're at all interested as a practitioner, I do an HR networking dinner every event on the first day, because it is just incredibly, it can be incredibly challenging and frustrating to try to find your HR peers. And that just makes it very personal, and folks get a chance to find each other and
Yeah.
recognize each other and share their stories. That's what everybody wants to do at these.
Yeah, that's what these events should be about, is the community, right? I mean, I think that the networking gets it's certainly valuable, but it gets almost undersold. It's beyond helpful. I know in my role, but it has to be for a practitioner out there. So yeah, no, I love the SSON, and you're right. There is a great audience of finance and HR practitioners and leaders that are in there, that I think that like I said, I think a lot of the vendors maybe overlook this one. They're commonly focused on the GPMI and the APA, as they should be, or the SHRM, or the GPA. But I think the shared service and outsourcing network is one that I'd love to see more vendors get involved in. So very good. The other one, big one, we were both at, oddly at different tracks. I was in a more of a buy side executive sort of forum, where you were more in the partner behind the curtains forum at the ADP meeting of the minds. Great event. It was here in Atlanta this time. It's always in a different city in the U.S. It's ADP's premier sort of North American event. 1,600 attendees this year, and really just a great buzz, right? Everyone seemed really happy to be together. A lot of great networking and sharing going on, and a lot of focus on HCM technology. I was really, really not surprised. I know ADP's been building some strong solutions over the last 4, 5, 6 years, really being very aggressive. But it was interesting to me to see how many firms, particularly emerging firms, were there making HCM platform buying decisions and looking at ADP in context with the big, the big players that you would expect to see. So kudos to ADP. Obviously, their roadmap is working, and just a great event. But what was your perspective, Julie? You're on a different side of the curtain, as I said.
Yeah, so I was in a different capacity, and actually, I think ADP Merits has really earned a huge call out here, because they did something I don't think they've ever tried before, and that is to bring the incredibly large client and prospect market that is usually part of meeting in the minds, and there's exhibitions, and their vendors and their partners and their marketplace folks, right? So it's just a huge event, together with what are smaller events and more targeted events. The one that I participate in is the Global Partner Summit. That gives us behind the scenes look at roadmap and implementation progress, and what's going on in service delivery for aftermarket clients. And I think there was also, the day that I left on Thursday, there was the executive summit, right? And so they really
Yes.
brought all of their stakeholders together. They're really building community in a way that they haven't built it before, maybe as obviously. And I hope that pays off for them, getting so many folks together.
Yes.
Um, what I will say from the Global Partner Summit perspective is, yeah, this is a time, a really intensive day long, when folks who work quite a bit with ADP service offerings get a chance to interact with. I think there were 19 senior most leaders in the ADP organization. What I really enjoyed most, Pete, was they had a new format, or I think it was very effective format this year. Each of the major product lines brought forward a 3-person panel
Oh, nice.
to discuss what's going on with the product and the roadmap. A person who was the lead of their implementation activity, and another person who leads the service delivery activity, and put them together in a panel. And so we walked through a panel on the Celergo Streamline product for a
Awesome.
lot of the global payroll. We walked through a similar panel with Global View folks, and not only Global View, in the sense that, of course, it serves the globe, but also their North American group, and they're specific to North American clients, where they have about 230 of those that use Global View as a U.S., Canada, or Mexico platform.
Wow.
You might not think that, right?
Yeah.
But it is what it is. And then the third trinity of leaders came from the workforce management side.
Yes.
And so that allowed not only a great, holistic view across the suite of these offerings. We did have a little bit on next gen or Lithion, right? Which is the part that you highlighted earlier, a couple other sessions. But these three areas, were just made for very interactive, holistic conversations and a lot of time for Q&A with the leaders from the audience. And so it's always a great event for getting caught up and up to speed.
Have you ever wondered what really makes a generation tick? Who gets to pick the name? And why the slang keeps changing? Don't worry, I can help. My name's Dr. Megan Grace. On hashtag Gen Z, I share the voices and experiences of Generation Z, how they're different from other generations, what moves them, and why they do what they do. In each episode, we go beyond the buzzwords and the stereotypes to dive into real conversations and the insights that matter to making intergenerational collaboration a reality. You can catch hashtag Gen Z on the Work to Find podcast network and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And always a diverse set of organizations that are there. And I think a lot of folks think that ADP is really just these North American small businesses. And I didn't really, yes, there's a lot of their businesses is full of that. Certainly it's where I think their sweet spot was and is. But I ran into so many mid-market firms that were outgrowing where they were and looking at ADP as part of their future solution. So it's not, I don't think this is your parents' ADP anymore, right? I mean, and we're going to have a blog on this. I should have mentioned that earlier. You and I are both put together a great POV on our perspectives from each of those, and we're putting that out very soon this week in our across our channel. So look for that soon. But maybe I could talk a little bit about what where the focus is for ADP in terms of their product, if you don't mind, Julie.
Yeah, please.
So certainly, and I think this fits beautifully with our theme, right? I mean, AI and ML were well on display here in this, in the theme of what they were talking about along the product lines, and really looking to be more predictive, proactive, and personalized in terms of leveraging their data. Obviously, Data Cloud with 1 million customers, right? I mean, you're talking about one of the biggest HR data sets on the planet. ADP activated that several years ago in Data Cloud, and it really underpins the capabilities, the insights that they're able to surface across all of their product offerings. But one of the things I really, really enjoyed hearing them talk about was just the focus on the intelligent service delivery, right? Using chatbots and virtual assistants to help with policy personalization, localized, right, to the employee's unique obviously location and what they're doing. I love just the constructs around, nudging employees with data to help them, right? They showed a great use case of an employee looking to maybe enter their time, and it was reminding them, hey, by now, most employees have used about 80% of their time off in this year. You've used less than 10% and you have none scheduled for the rest of the year. Did you want to maybe start to look at that? And I think that's a phenomenal example of where employees can be provided guidance to say, hey, did you know? Right. And by the way, here's what you could do about it. And that's what I love. They're sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we saw some similar nudges and kind of sneak previews.
Yeah.
And also in the area, I guess focused a little bit more in the back office area, but the idea of nudging for missed time punches, right?
Yes.
Something that's a high volume activity that a lot of providers are looking at. And so,
yeah.
So it was nice to see, some of that being baked in.
Yeah. The other thing I really thought was super simple, but I'm not sure you're seeing this in the same way is, they've got the sort of post-paycheck experience sentiment, right? That they're coming to employees and very simply asking them, how was your payroll experience, right? Post the paycheck being delivered. And now that employee may have never called for anything. That employee may have never done anything different than they normally do, than put their time in and work their shift. But to reach out to them and sort of say, hey, how was your experience? How could it be better? I think that's great, right? I think that's an excellent step in the right direction. And when you start to connect that and those nudges and the data that's sitting there, I think you're going to really get better outcomes for payroll and many other areas of HR that I know we're going to talk a little bit about later. And then, of course, I think there was a lot of focus on talent intelligence, right? Leveraging that data, leveraging benchmarks and insights, and really surfacing the types of skills and career profiles that the workers will need in order to be best fit for an environment. So, it was really exciting. I had a good time. A lot of great conversations, a lot of good stuff coming from ADP, and just a relentless focus on the user experience, the employee experience, the practitioner. I was excited to see all of it. So good event.
Absolutely.
All around.
Great.
Yeah.
Yep. Great event and great job, ADP.
Yeah. So where are you next, Julie? What's next up for you in terms of events?
Well, I have a couple of maybe the same ones as you on your radar, but the one that might be unique to us both is I think you might know that I started a quarterly HR webinar series this year. We dabbled in it last year. We've done one already so far, and the next quarterly webinar that I'll be hosting from Heron Palmer's site is on May 23rd. And speaking of the skills and talent intelligence topic, we'll be going there, and we'll be going there, in typical fashion, just calling out what is what's really happening and what's kind of noise, and how do we get from noise to what's happening or what should be happening. So look for that on May 23rd. I think you have a couple of things coming up before then that we might see each other at.
Yes. Yeah. I actually have, it reminds me, I have a webinar coming up on the 19th. Let me just double check that. I believe it's the 19th with OneSource Virtual. We're doing a discussion on how to get the most out of your people and your data. And that's, payroll obviously going to play heavily into that, but also core HR. So look for that, April 19th. And then, of course, I'm going to be at Unleash in Vegas the week of April 26th to the 27th, I believe it is. Yeah. And my good friend Steve Goldberg will be there with me, my partner in crime, and we will be speaking at that event. We haven't entirely nailed down what we're going to talk about yet, but that is forthcoming. And then, of course, we've got the APA Congress coming up. Are you going to be there, Julie? I think you are.
Yep. I think you and I are going to be doing some sort of fireside chat with Nathan. And so
I hope so.
Looking forward to being there and checking that out and sharing that with folks. So I hope if you're going, folks out there, you give us a shout out so we can connect while we're there.
Yes, good. Yeah, I love the APA Congress. I call it the Super Bowl of payroll. I will be well displayed there. I've got a keynote, a breakout session, a couple of panels with a few vendors. I'm doing some podcasting there with the vendors. And so just really excited for that up in Denver. And I've never been to Denver, so I'm going to make a trip out of it personally for that week. Yeah, never been to Colorado actually, which is weird.
Well, it should be a little bit warmer by the time we get there in May.
Yes. I hope. Okay, let's do a little bit of market news, and then I thought we could jump into our topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So right out of the gate, right, we've seen, and look, this is not a knock on Workday or anyone else, but we've seen the recent lawsuit that's come out around AI bias, right? And just to give you a little bit of background on this, a gentleman, I'd say he's in a protected class. I believe he is Black. He is, I think they said he's over 40. And fundamentally considered, again, I think he's also disabled. I think there's a disability listed as well. So obviously a protected class. This gentleman is claiming that Workday is biased and that the AI eliminates people in his groups from being able to obtain work, right? So he's alleging, I think, 80 to 100 applications that he applied to through Workday. Now, I don't know if these were Workday specific jobs or it was jobs leveraging the Workday platform, meaning it was other employers. I believe it could be maybe both. The gentleman is well credentialed, multiple degrees, and certainly some, good background from what I can glean from the story. Lots of questions I would ask here, and I'm not saying one way or the other that this is right, wrong, or indifferent, or who if anyone is actually at fault here for doing anything wrong. But this gentleman is claiming that the system is biased, right? And the system is eliminating him from being able to get any of these jobs or any sort of advancement. So not sure where this is going to lead to, but this has certainly opened up a can of worms, right? And at least opened up the questions of what is the AI doing? There's so much around, it's going to replace us all, right? We're all going to be jobless, which I think is we're going to talk about a little bit. But the reality of it is that these things are here. It's not even to say they're coming anymore. They are. They're at scale, being built into all of the solutions that are being created today. I don't know of a modern vendor building a modern capability that does not have some level of AI, machine learning, or NLP, if not all three of them. So I will leave it at this, though. Again, we're going to keep an eye on see how this goes. But I was following the Workday Summit a couple of weeks ago while I was at ADP Meeting of the Minds, and I have been to the Workday Summit. I believe they might do one for partners, but they do one for analysts every year. A handful of analysts are brought in for this Innovation Summit, and we get direct access to everything Workday's doing, kind of future forward. And what they're thinking and get time with their executives. And so I was following some of the tweets. I think I picked this one up from Stacia Garr, my good friend over at Red Thread, the founder of Red Thread Research. And she mentioned that Aneel Bursary said, in a statement, like, look, reminded everyone that Workday is a data processor. The platform is a data processor, and that the customer's data, it's theirs, right? And they need to decide how they're going to use these algorithms, And I think it sounds kind of like, hey, it's not our responsibility, and I don't think that that's what's meant here. I know, in fact, Workday takes a very, very serious approach to their their AI ethics. But I think the point that he's trying to, communicate here is that you need to understand what these things are doing. You need to understand how they work and how they're being applied to your organization and your use cases, and really be involved. And I think that that's a very, very necessary thing that folks need to hear, right? You need to be under the hood on this stuff and really understand what your organization, what your data is doing and how it's being used. So, we'll see where this goes.
Workday today, but I remember one of the earliest cases back in 2018. I
yes.
If I blogged or podcasted about it, or exactly how I was involved in bringing it up, but Amazon, right?
Yes.
Was an early adopter of some algorithms used in a recruiting tool, and and there was some accusations or it potentially showed bias against women, and so they pulled it right away. And so, I do think that's a big part of what we're hoping to talk about a little bit today is, the potential and the risk, and it's a tool. So the potential for good and for bad, and it has to be monitored, and you have to assign risk to it. But
yeah.
The Use Case Podcast is where technology vendors get to talk about themselves. And it's a wonderful place for vendors, investors, and practitioners to listen to the story of the solution, the features, the benefits, the attributes, etc. And we get to know the CEO or founder during the call, and we also get to know the tech. So subscribe to the Use Case Podcast.
Get ready to turn up the volume on your HR game. I'm Jay Arnold, former musician turned HR leader and host of Backstage Pass, the HR Rockstar. Each episode pulls back the curtain on key HR topics, from leadership lessons and bold career pivots to the latest in HR tech and talent strategies, featuring the rock stars within their industries. If you're ready to shake up the status quo and amplify your impact, this is your all-access pass. You can catch the show on the Work-Defined Podcast Network and wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe now, and let's rock the future of work together.
It's like any new technology, right? Like I remember, I know it's going to date me, but I remember when the internet came into the workplace. Like that was such a, it was such a mind-blowing thing, first of all, but also it created all these new things that HR and everyone had to kind of address, right? And so just like anything, I think, and don't get me wrong, I think this is maybe even equally, if not more impactful and game-changing, especially for HR than the internet. But I think that, like any technology, you're going to have to make decisions about your environment and really understand how you're leveraging these things and make sure that they're augmenting and doing positive things and not being used for nefarious reasons or anything like that. So yeah. Okay, so some of our other news that again has dominated the airwaves has been ChatGPT, right? So I thought we could talk a little bit about some of the announcements that came out of OpenAI, which is the organization who is developing this. And I don't know if you've seen it, but the founder, and I always forget his name. I think it's Sam. I want to say it starts with an A. He's been giving a number of interviews to really talk about what they're doing and why and the power of this thing. And when I say power, I think it's underestimated. It's an understatement. So one of the key things that happened recently is OpenAI launched what is the new iteration of the engine, if you will, that enables ChatGPT to work, and that is GPT-4. And basically, right, we're talking about a large language model, generative AI. So a large language model is essentially an AI or machine learning that can take in massive amounts of information, data, unstructured data and make sense of it, right? Give you back feedback, give you back outputs. And now with its new capabilities, it can even accept images and other non-structured data sort of inputs. Take all of that and really make it into something that is leverageable, right? And now with GPT-4, the capabilities are really impressive. They showed how they leveraged the solution, or excuse me, the technology to take basic exams like we would take, right? The LSAT or the ACT or the SAT. And even, for example, in a bar exam, GPT-4 performed in the top 10% of test takers, right? So scary. It's scary powerful. It's incredible what it can process. And so, really just wanted to kind of highlight what they're doing. Again, it's interesting to see the ways in which some of these things are being used. I saw something the other day, someone asked it, and you can go on and play with it, right? I mean, I think they have it open pretty much for anyone. And now you're seeing organizations begin to leverage it in their own work, right? Engaging it through API, which is another one of their big announcements. But you've seen a lot of wacky use cases, right? I saw someone ask it to explain quantum physics to a child in the style of Snoop Dogg. So there's lots of ways to use this. I'm sure you've seen them, Julie. Funny ways in which people are leveraging this. But what's also scary, right? Back to HR having to kind of deal with this is, in addition to use it in their day to day, is the fact that you have employees potentially putting sensitive data into it, right? There was a story of a CEO putting information in there and asking it for, I think, strategic help or something along the lines. So, yeah, it's opened up a lot of cans of worms here, but really exciting stuff, right? We talked about some of the use cases earlier that ADP is looking at with AI, and all of the HCMs are. But ChatGPT, I think, is taking things to a whole other level with its power and just the sheer volume of data it can work through in a very quick time and make some sort of sense out of it.
That's right. So I think we're well into our topic, right? As we even just talk about the news, because we thought this would be a great time to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing I think they announced too that's important to point out too is just their API approach, right? So now they've put it into the hands of large enterprise type customers, but also big tech, right? So there are a number of firms that are using this and connecting it into things that they've already built, right? I've heard Shopify is using it to build out personalized assistance for shopping. Instacart is doing things with it as well to create more of shoppable answers to customers' product questions. So you can certainly see how this could come over to HR very quickly, especially now that it's gotten into the hands of these enterprise grade solutions. But let's talk about what's the reality, right? The title for this episode is really around, is AI a game changer for HR, or is it a game over type situation? And so I wanted to really just sort of dig into a little bit with you, Julie, and see what you're seeing on the front line. So maybe we could just start there. Like, what's the reality, right? We know that these solutions, if you look at any modern solution today, I get behind the hood, if you will, of everything from payroll to HCM to point solutions across the HR spectrum. And anything worth its salt, anything modern today is being built with AI just layered in, right? At all paths. NLP for virtual assistants, and certainly the machine learning, which something like a ChatGPT is, right? It's a deep learning. It's even beyond, it's the next level of machine learning. It's being trained. These things are coming to HR and payroll at scale. But I thought we could just sort of talk about what's the reality, Julia? Like what's really making its way out there, and has it arrived to the frontline practitioner at this point?
Yeah, that's such a great place to go, right? From the art of the possible and what providers are doing, because many buyers, many HR organizations want to get to the place where they're using those efficiencies and those technologies. But you mentioned something even just in the GPT-4 basics, which is, they're taking massive amounts of data and creating insights and learnings from them. And your average client doesn't have massive amounts of data, right? So when you think about how do I tap into that type of power when I'm maybe not the biggest fish in the pond. I'm not a Walmart or a PepsiCo or Coca-Cola or someone ginormous with massive amounts of data. And that's where I think we see providers really stepping up and coming to the plate first. And so, as kind of a Gen 1 adoption of some of these items, we see a lot of buyers are interested in and want to understand how the provider is embedding and using tools and this sort of efficiency, and where they can leverage it across multiple clients. And that gives them kind of a scale to bring some of these things to market that maybe they can't touch on their own. And so,
Yeah.
for the first gen, I think, that we'll see of this, unless you happen to be one of those very, very large buyers who's tapping into these technologies in finance and other areas of your organization, will be going or expecting that the providers are embedding these sorts of things with the types of use cases that we called out in our ADP update, that are practical, pragmatic, and are a game changer for whatever scale I happen to have in house.
Yeah. 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 I mean, if you think about it, we're already living in symbiosis with these things, right? It's in your pocket, right? Whatever phone you have has a chat assistant. I've got one of the chat assistants on my desk. I'm not going to say her name. She'll wake up and she might order something. So, but they're all around us, right? And I think that you've already seen a lot of the chatbot capability certainly coming into HR. I feel like there's not a solution out there that doesn't have at least a virtual assistant anymore. And so I think that, there's certainly a lot of there's a lot of angst around this. And I think it's partly the media, to be honest with you. But I saw a survey, and I apologize, I don't know who did this. I'm looking at an infographic that I grabbed. And they asked practitioners, is this a friend or a foe? What do you think? And it was about 50-50. 57% saw it as an opportunity, while about 43% saw it as a threat. And I get it, right? I think that it's important to understand that, yes, artificial intelligence will in fact replace jobs, right? Hard stop. That's the case. And not just in HR, but everywhere, right? It's going to replace the stuff no one wants to do, or that is not worth doing, or there's a way for you to do something with that time better, right? So for example, all the ticking and tying in payroll, right? I talk about this all the time. That is a monotonous, silly, redundant, error-prone, awful experience for how you run payroll. Those of us old folks that came up in that world, we know all too well the hell of that. And so there's no reason a payroll practitioner should be doing that anymore. That work should really be surfaced to them, right? Hey, here's what the anomalies are. Go and act on these things with your expertise. And so I think it's important to understand that, yes, it will replace some jobs. But what I think it's going to do is actually create totally different jobs in the same way that any technology has in the past. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for payroll for HR and payroll in my opinion. There's so many, like Julie, I was thinking about this, right? Take this use case, right? You've got all this stuff when you've worked in consulting for many, many years, right? Mm-hmm. I did as well I worked for Deloitte, for example, for 3.5 years. And one of the craziest things I always was so frustrated by was the fact that we would have this knowledge base, right? And this happens in every company, whether you're a consultant or not. But I feel like in consulting, it's even more compounded because we're all out there doing all these things, right? We're all out there building our frameworks and working with our clients and leveraging the methodologies we've been trained. And then you'll run across this thing that's like out of the box, right? And you're like, and you don't know how to solve it because you haven't come across it before, but someone out there in your organization has solved it. And they do have documentation and data and information, but it's sitting on their laptop. Maybe it's not in the knowledge base. And then you've got to find that person somehow to be able to know that they have the answer to the thing that you're looking for. And what I think about when I think about something like large language models and generative AI is the ability to take all of that knowledge-based stuff and all the stuff on our laptops and drop it into this database that can make sense of it, right? And you can search and quickly find those things and surface that methodology that's buried somewhere on someone's hard drive or the notes that they took down and learned how to solve, but never had the chance to go and transfer it to the rest of the organization. So that's just one that I personally feel like jumps out at me when I think about huge amounts of data and how you could make sense of it and get down to an answer and get down to something that you need right away. So that's one I'm just excited about.
Hi, we're Meg and Amy from The Meg and Amy Show.
We're not only tech execs and big picture thinkers, we're also best friends.
We're curious learners. And on this podcast, we're challenging the status quo and activating the future.
And we're going to give advice about work and leadership, right, Meg?
You know, we can't help ourselves. But this podcast is about exploring possibility, not being right.
That sounds refreshing.
For more, tune in to The Meg and Amy Show.
Well, I would say in an ADP upcoming research report, we got a sneak preview of that. And the topic of conversation was just keeping resources or having resources available and excited to fit payroll of the future, right? The needs that are out there. And even after all of the innovations in, let's say robotics process automation, which hit transactional activities first, they still log 22% of what payroll folks are doing is kind of reconciling between HR and payroll activities.
Yeah.
As a monotonous part of the job that isn't, doesn't attract new talent and the youth of today. And so the point is there's still plenty of opportunity left for AI and RPA and the different automation techniques to impact and perform some of the work. And the other thing that I think folks don't really think about too much is it's not a binary choice. Like we say jokingly, friend or foe, right? But the fact of the matter is, in HR, where these technologies really provide the most value is interlaced with human decision making, right? And so it's really meant to take the monotony and the grunt work and the precision work that tools can perform in some cases so much better than us, and put it before the practitioner so that it accelerates their ability to decide and act with the nuances and the empathy that we're really trying to keep front center in our trade, right?
Yes.
And so if you can think about it through that lens, it makes sense that it's an accelerant, right? More than anything, more than a replacement.
Yes.
And I think that allows you to get a lot more excited about what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think we're moving from that automation to augmentation sort of stage now. It's been coming, right? And it's been inching there, but I think this is going to speed it up. And you mentioned a lot of really good points there about empathy and other skills that I think are going to be so critical as these things take away the monotony and the stuff we don't really want to deal with or we shouldn't be wasting time with. And that's going to be this stuff around the ability to be creative, right? The ability to have, emotional intelligence and a, what I would maybe call a cognitive fluidity, right? Being able to sort of leverage these things and make sense of what it's being told, because there also has to be a check and a balance of these things too, right? Just in the same way you would check and balance anything. I think you can't just blindly trust it, right? You have to look at it and say, hey, it doesn't make sense, right? What it's saying or what it's surfacing. So things like creativity and just, you're right, empathy and other areas of, and people leadership, right? Just leading people and helping people make good decisions. I think all of that stuff, and let's don't forget communication. I harp on this all the time with my kids. So many of those soft skills I think are going to really bubble up as being sought after versus maybe the other stuff. And at the end of the day, I think you've also got to maintain a very good understanding of technology in the future. You're really going to have to understand how these things are playing with your environment, your data.
Pete, I'm going to throw out a really cool, since we're hot on the spring circuit of conferences where a lot of new data and research comes out. One of the SSON data stats was talking about shared services and staffing and skilling and the shortage of skills, which 70 or more % of folks feel. And I thought it was incredibly interesting for them to have found that in looking for the variety of skills needed for shared services, there's now fewer than a third of organizations that focus on the functional depth of knowledge versus 2/3 that focus on the sort of skills that underlie a service orientation and exactly what we're talking about. And I do believe that that's partly because there is a lot more intelligence available from some of these automation and other tools to help supplement the deep functional expertise that before was irreplaceable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to change things, right? And I think we have to, like everything in our world, we're going to have to remain adaptable. Something I'm very proud I learned very young in the military to remain as adaptable and agile as possible. And I think that's what you have to be doing now. Just keep learning, learn how these things work, learn to understand how they can make your life easier, how they can elevate your team and give you that empowerment. So Julie, how do you, I want to ask you a couple of things personally here. So how do you, let me think about how to say this. So how do you sort of guide buyers in looking at this stuff? What do you what's the way in which they ought to look at adopting these in context with their strategic goals or the things they're trying to accomplish? Like, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so what I recommend here is there are certain parts or components of this that are the nature of the technology or the nature of the beast that any provider is going to bring forward, whether you're searching for a tool or whether you're evaluating managed services, and they have embedded tools. And so I really see a lot of the heavy lifting still today being done by the non-SME constituency on your in your RFP processes, right?
Yeah.
So they have finance, usually a finance adjunct to the team, and that's usually an incredibly important role for focusing on the stability and the size and basically the construct of the organization, whether it's a software vendor or a provider that you're looking at. And IT will dig deep into the security and the GDPR aspects, the compliance from a mechanical perspective, right? The mechanics and the integration, safety and security, and then your contractual protections from legal, where you start looking at liability and so forth. So these are team members that sometimes are not as involved in search and selection of tools or services as the payroll SMEs themselves or the HR SMEs themselves, and yet they play an increasingly important role in looking beyond the functional compliance and the functional actions that were transactions that we're looking for these tools to drive.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see this bubbling into or coming up on RFPs now that you're starting to have questions to vendors around this? Hopefully, I hope.
Yes,
But
for
yeah.
sure. And at a first level, again, as I would say, kind of Gen 1, it's infancy, other than, incredibly large or advanced organizations. Usually it starts as what have you done or how have you embedded and how are you making use of in meaningful ways these sorts of tools. And so providers are starting to flex the muscle to differentiate themselves. They've all had to come up with use cases, and it's really been fun over the last few years to see some quite useless use cases come about just for the
Yeah.
sake of proving that I have RPA or AI and ML type capabilities, and then eventually over some scale and with a little bit of time they refine their own muscle and start to bring more and more meaningful use cases and meaningful applications to the table, and that's where it gets exciting.
Yeah. Any key use cases you're seeing that are most impactful right now? You're kind of like the main ones you're finding.
I think still from a payroll and integrations perspective, just the grunt work of a lot of validations
Yeah.
and checks and balances are really the most practical. Where
Totally.
folks are just dying to go is some more of that service knowledge base type of support, and yet that's
Yeah.
also where you have to wrap your hands around the ethics and risk and and some more big picture types of things to get
Yes.
comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. The ethics, right? Every vendor has an ethics and AI sort of statement, responsibility approach. And I think it's important to have a conversation with your vendor about that, right? Hopefully that's been something that buyers are discussing with their vendors and understanding, because again, you need to understand what these things are doing. You need to understand how they work. You need to understand how they're applied. There can be some danger, right, in surfacing information that says, "Hey, Julie's about to leave the organization, right? She's a flight risk." That may not be accurate, right? And
Not.
yeah, right. I mean, let's be honest. Like, I think it's almost I don't think it's a scientific fact, but I believe it's fairly well understood, or at least accepted, that humans are inherently biased, and humans are training these things. So you have to be very careful with this stuff. And I think that while we're in this stage of sort of exploration, is what I would sort of feel like we are doing right now with HR. I think you have to really tread carefully with anything, understand the use cases, understand or that you're trying to solve, and understand how it's going to work and what it's going to do, and where the audits and controls are to these things, to make sure that you're not doing irreversible damage to your brand or your end result, right?
That's employees, right? I mean,
yeah.
And initially you're kind of toying with some capabilities to create a little bit of a virtual water cooler.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of things being surmised based on evidence and observations, and that's not unlike a water cooler. Some of them might be quite premonitory, and others of which is just wrong.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah. And I think, I mean, look, I think as people get, begin to see the impact and how it can help make their jobs easier, make them smarter, if you will, more intelligent, and have better decision making, insight driven decision making. I think they're gonna, people will understand the power and the impact. Yeah, so look, but just to kind of round this out a little bit, right? I know we could probably go on and on, but I wanted to just obviously, kind of close this out here. Let's talk about the change management element of this, right? Because again, I think that's the theme of almost what we've been saying over and over without saying it, is there's a lot of things that are going to change. The roles are going to change, right? It's going to become better focused work, right? And not this monotonous sort of manual stuff we've been doing in the past. And I love all the things that it does for HR. I mean, I think we're talking mostly back office, but like, let's think about like the recruiting part of this and the ability to find, people, and the ability to train people. I mean, learning alone, I think, is going to be really big impact here, where you can bring a lot of data together and give people, very good, succinct insights off of all of that, and teach them very, very strategically. So, but the change management element of this, what do you feel is important here, Julie, to remember? Because this is a key piece we always talk about in transformation, but where does this sort of fit in when it comes to things like AI?
Yeah, well, my first thought, Pete, is broadly speaking, change management probably needs to address just the overarching concerns, wonderment, uncertainty of what can or cannot these tools do in my environment, right?
Yeah.
And how will we as an employer be using them? There isn't a person as we've moved to the cloud that hasn't wondered, what does my employer watch? Do they watch things? What are they doing? Right. And so this just brings that dimension to a new level. In order to make sure that we are able to drive some adoption and get folks excited about it and not concerned about it, we have to first talk about what it is and how we're planning to use it, and how it will enable an employee experience, or how it will enable a manager's job activities, and take out some of the mundane. Let's assume that's what we're doing, right? That feels like step one, is to start to tear down some of the barriers of the unknown. To me.
Agreed. Yeah. And, I think this is a key pathway to HR truly being able to become strategic, right? I mean, I feel like HR has been whipped a lot. I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot, about not being strategic enough. We saw that again, we always reference the Sapient data, but we saw that come up, that strategic HR, or HR just isn't being strategic enough or delivering enough of that value. So I think this is a pathway to them being relieved of that monotony and minutia that will give them the insights and the guidance to be able to do more and be a better strategic partner and have more strategic outcomes. So I'm very excited about it personally.
And maybe the panic button there is, geez, we've been waiting forever to step up and be that strategic partner. Like, we don't want to see ChatGPT step up and be more strategic than me, right? I mean, honestly, honest about it. That's there's some concerns there when you start talking about what its capability is and what use cases are being seen in more broader context. It's like, well, if they can write the whole strategy plan, what chance do I have?
Or run HR like Snoop Dogg. Who knows? Anyway, well, look, this has been a really great conversation as always. I know we say this, it's cliche, but we could go on. And I'm sure this topic is going to be back. We'll be talking about this more in the months and years to come. I know it. So it's been great as always, Julie. Anything to close out that you'd want to share?
No, goodness, like you say, I'm looking forward to our next thing here. And please, folks, check out not only the podcast here, but look for some of the blogs and activities that are coming out to give you some more detail. If you have any questions or want to know what's the news from the conference circuit in the spring, reach out to Pete or I, or reach out to the podcast LinkedIn, and we'll make sure we share what we know.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for that, Julie. It's good talking to you as always.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Okay.